I'm in Albania, where the Trump family has put another government on the brink of collapse. But this time, it's not regime change, it's corruption. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump's luxury resort project on protected land is destroying one of the last stretches of untouched coastline in all Europe. But the details of the project are so outrageous that it made Albania's already rampant corruption problem impossible to ignore. And that's saying something, because corruption is not a new issue in Albania. It's so ubiquitous that people took it for granted as a fact of life for decades. Edi Rama has been prime minister in this building behind me for 13 years, but now an entire generation of Albanians is calling for him to go. It's being referred to as the Flamingo Revolution.
It has been dubbed the Flamingo Revolution.
Yeah, that's what I just said. And it's gotten the attention of international media,
Albania,
European politicians,
Albanians,
and Dua Lipa.
Albania.
So today we're gonna look into that deal, what it says about Albanian politics, and what it means for the country's future. It starts with this flamingo and that little guy. But those cute fellas would not have inspired these flamingos if the story didn't get a lot more messed up along the way, so buckle up. These flamingos, along with pelicans, sea turtles, monk seals, and dozens of other species, live in this protected nature reserve in Albania called Vjosa-Narta. It's a complex of pristine wetlands and some of Europe's last remaining entirely wild coastline, which makes it super important for Europe's environment. And together with Sazan Island, a former secretive military outpost under Albania's communist dictatorship, which has since been abandoned to let nature take over, this whole protected nature reserve is a national treasure for Albania. Until she came along.
an unbelievable, beautiful 1,400-hectare private island in the middle of the Mediterranean. We were on a friend's boat and we stopped for a swim. Effectively, that's how we found it. We swam to the island. We went on a hike, barefoot all the way up to the top, and we were just captivated.
Okay, I could not make this up. There's so much there. First of all, when she says a friend's boat, I shit you not, she's talking about this specific super yacht that Christopher Nolan used in the movie Tenet as the villain's yacht.
Want to show me your yacht?
And all this happened in 2021. While we were all in COVID lockdown, Trump's daughter was sailing the Mediterranean with Jared Kushner on a friend's supervillain super yacht. Then they stumble upon an island that used to be a secret military base full of abandoned bunkers and unexploded landmines. And they're like, I'm going to invest billions and turn this into a luxury resort. I swear, the only way you can make this more Bond villain coded is if they were building their lair inside of a volcano or, I don't know, on Mars. And of course, nothing sinister ever happens on a Trump-related billionaire's private island, right? So they find this
Unbelievable, beautiful 1,400-hectare private island
that's actually part of a protected national park, and they approach Albania's prime minister, Edi Rama, with quite literally a boatload of cash to buy not only Sazan Island, but also a large chunk of Vjosa-Narta called the Sfernets area to build a luxury resort on the coast. And to his credit, Edi Rama said, sorry, this is a protected area, it's just not for sale. And everyone went home. The end. Thank you so much for watching this video. A lot more work went into it than you realize, so any support you can throw towards the channel is greatly appreciated. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. Sorry. Of course, he didn't say that. In fact, here's the real video of Edi Rama's reaction to being offered that resort project that Barely Informed has exclusively obtained. So you have this entire protected area. The resort is planned to be here, and the nearest airport is a more than 2-hour drive away. So if you're gonna develop this region for luxury tourism, you're gonna need a closer airport for rich people to land their private jets. So what they did is they carved out a conveniently airport-shaped chunk from the protected zone and just plopped an airport in this no longer protected land. And the funny thing is, construction here started in 2021, but this sign is the building permit information displayed outside the construction site. The permit was only issued in 2023, 2 years after construction started, and it only lasted 36 months or 3 years, meaning it's already expired this year. And as you can see, the construction isn't anywhere near finished. So their solution was to move this little guard cabin in front of the part of the permit that specifies the permit's length. No more expiration date. Problem solved. But what worked for the airport wouldn't fly, no pun intended, for the Svernet's coastal area. So here's the thing. Albania, this little country of only 3 million people, applied to join the EU way back in 2009. And Edi Rama, the current prime minister, was elected and re-elected and re-elected and re-elected on the promise to see that EU accession process through. So eventually, Albania made it onto a short list as one of the most likely next countries to enter the EU, but that application hinges on 2 things. Rule of law, specifically dealing with corruption in the country, for which the EU made them create an independent special prosecutor's office against corruption and organized crime called SPAC, S-P-A-K, we'll get back to them later, I promise. And the environment, for which they passed an environmental protection law in 2017 to align with EU norms. But when Jared and Ivanka came knocking, that law became super inconvenient. So in 2024, they amended the law, specifically creating an exemption allowing for the building on protected land of not 3-star or 4-star, but luxury 5-star resorts and above. You know, the kind of resort that the vast majority of Albanians would never be able to see the inside of. Now, the EU said this new law isn't compatible with EU standards, called for development projects in the area to be suspended until the 2024 amendment is repealed, and a full environmental impact study of the project can be conducted. But by that point, bulldozers were already flattening the land before they got any environmental study or even a building permit. Do you see a pattern here? They're ramming the project through without any transparency so that by the time it can be challenged, the damage is done. The only consequence of halting the project would be to hurt Albania's economy. And they even went as far as saying that the bulldozers were there to conduct the environmental impact study. But this is where the story takes a turn. Because protests against development in Vjosa-Narta have been ongoing for years. But up until recently, they were mainly comprised of environmental activists and local residents being dispossessed. They hadn't yet caught national, let alone international attention. But on May 31st, during one of these protests, the resort developer's private security grabbed and dragged one of the local residents away, while police stood by, doing nothing. The video went viral in Albania, and the protests reached critical mass.
Since then, protesters have been gathering in the streets of Tirana, the capital, demanding Rama's resignation every single day.
So why did police stand by doing nothing in that situation? Because the Kushner resort story isn't just about the government selling public land without environmental due diligence.
What's most problematic about how this deal has been set up is been set up in a very complicated form through layers of shell companies. There is members of organized crime that keeps getting involved. There is an ongoing investigation for money laundering. So there is a lot of red flags about this deal that has raised question for the Albanian people.
Meet Besarlik Meta. He's an award-winning investigative journalist and the editor of Brink in Albania. He's been targeted by organized crime in the past, and the morning of that interview, he received a slap lawsuit to silence his reporting on this story.
The government has mentioned this figure of 4 billion euros as investment, but we don't know where is it going to come from? Is it real? If you ask them about the project, they say we don't have a project. If we ask them who owns the land, they say we don't know who owns the land or who is investing behind it. If you tell them that the land and the people behind it are tied to organized crime, they will tell you we don't care. We just see what is on paper.
So this is Artur Shehu, an Albanian-American businessman based in Miami. And he is one of 20 people who've just been indicted on charges related to money laundering, organized crime, and international drug trafficking. Shehu actually claimed to own land that's now being developed into this resort, but he claimed ownership of that land using documents dating back to the Ottoman Empire. Except, according to SPAC, the Special Prosecutor's Office on Corruption and Organized Crime, that document was doctored. The borders of the land they claimed were shifted towards the coastline to fit with the resort project, and the document was allegedly deliberately mistranslated in order to link the land ownership to Shehu's family. But this isn't the first time Artur Shehu has been involved in something like this. He allegedly did the exact same thing in the case of a different resort called the Green Coast Resort further down south. And that resort is currently under investigation as a suspected money laundering operation for organized crime. And our buddy Artur has an active arrest warrant from Spock, who say he's taken part in meetings including in Spain, Monaco, Germany, and Aruba, where, quote, the transportation and smuggling of large quantities of narcotics into Europe was planned. And it's worth noting that the Albanian mafia, working with Latin American drug cartels, are one of Europe's main cocaine suppliers. And prosecutors also say Shehu has been meeting with senior members of the Albanian government. Anyway, back to the Kushner resort. Shehu initially sold that land to a shell company for 5.5 million euros. Then a different shell company bought that initial shell company and acquired the land for 122 million euros. And a different Albanian businessman was reportedly on both sides of that deal, selling the property to himself through shell companies at a more than 2,000% markup. All of this, again, according to Spock, who froze and seized that account used in that transaction. But the network of shell companies involved here is insane.
At the bottom, you have the developer, which is the Zvernet South Adriatic Development Company, which is registered in Albania, and the company in the holding, which was used for the land acquisition called Albanian Land Development. Then the first one is owned by another company, which is Sazan Development Holding LLC, which is owned by Sazan Real Estate Development LLC, which is owned by three other companies, which are the Asset Real Estate Venture LLC in Qatar, which is tied to the Kayat brothers. You have another company in Luxembourg called Global Trade Retail SA. You have Jamco Global LLC in the United States and Delaware. And we know that Sazan Real Estate Development LLC is related to Asher Abissera, which is the CEO of Kushner-linked Atlantic Incubator Partners, which is the strategic investor company branch for the island development next door to this Zvernet's protected area.
That's not even all the shell companies we know of, and we don't know all the companies involved in all of this. Many of these companies are set up to shield the identities of the owners, meaning most of the ultimate beneficiaries of this whole deal remain anonymous.
I mean, if you think about all the offshore havens in the world, we check a lot of boxes through this deal. This should be, I mean, I worked in the Pandora Papers and the Panama Papers. This should be raising all the alarm bells for a law enforcement institution, and it has. The Special Prosecution Office in Albania against organized crime and corruption has seized $120 million through this transaction because they believe this is a money laundering transaction.
To be clear, none of this is typical of a real estate deal.
This is typical of real estate deals in Albania.
Okay, fair enough. The point is, this resort involves billions of dollars of investments and will make even more once it's open. And all of that, plus the complicated shell companies and the lack of transparency, make it the perfect setup to potentially launder a lot of drug money for the Albanian mafia.
If all this illegality is going on, the government should be providing answer. Albania has laws on the books that says that the government should be fighting money laundering, not transforming the country in a paradise for suspected drug traffickers to launder the illicit proceeds of narcotic trafficking in Europe.
Now, here I have to point out, innocent until proven guilty, justice has to run its course, an indictment isn't a conviction, yada yada yada. But it's weird how the government is rushing forward with this despite all the allegations. Edi Rama has acknowledged the indictment of Shehu, especially the charges of document forgery, but he says it doesn't matter anymore whether the document was forged, because the sale already took place, so now the land belongs to the people who bought it. And apparently neither the land's status as a protected reserve nor the alleged forgery involved in the sale invalidates the purchase. Of course, Shehu denies all the allegations, with his lawyer saying that he is neither a drug trafficker nor a forger of property documents. And finally, importantly, nowhere in any of the investigative reporting or in Spock's indictments is there any evidence that Kushner or the Trump family knew about any of this. They say they're not a party to this matter and are not a subject of any investigation, and they continue to believe the land acquisition was lawful. But it's incredibly ironic that while the Trump administration is claiming a supposedly hard stance on drug trafficking to justify bombing small boats in the Caribbean and overthrowing Maduro in Venezuela based on a flimsy drug trafficking narrative, and you can watch our video on that if you want to know more. Meanwhile, Trump pardoned Honduras's former president, who was convicted in the US of trafficking 400 tons of cocaine into the country, and Trump's family, his daughter and his son-in-law, are involved in a real estate deal that may be laundering hundreds of millions of dollars for drugs that ultimately came from Latin American drug cartels. Now, when Rama defends the project, he says Albania needs development and investment, and luxury resorts generate much higher revenues than conventional tourism. But what all of this should tell you is the people who will profit from this project aren't the Albanian people as a whole, and none of the protests or the investigations or the indictments or the alleged involvement of organized crime have made Rama's government blink. In fact, they've accused the protesters of either being fascists or paid by Iran, which, okay, weird. And Rama said it doesn't matter how unpopular the project gets, quote, "There is no chance for this investment to stop as long as I'm here." He also said if the Trump family wasn't involved, nobody would give a shit, which he kind of has a point. That's the main reason the story has been getting so much international attention. It's just that the Kushner story is putting a brighter spotlight on a problem that isn't new and was already well known and documented. So it's worth asking, how has Albania managed to make it this far in the EU's membership process despite the country's well-documented problems with corruption and organized crime? And thankfully, I was able to speak with the leader of the European Parliament's anti-corruption intergroup to ask him that question.
There is corruption in Albania, no doubt about it. If you look at international rankings, if Albania would join the European Union tomorrow, it would be the most corrupt EU member state according to Transparency International.
Corruption is to a level of state capture. This has been well documented.
That's because many members of Albania's organized crime underworld have managed to become, over the years, the country's legitimate, or seemingly legitimate, oligarchy. Thin fig leaf of legitimacy as long as you don't look too closely. And that's also how they've managed to capture the state and have such an influence in Albania's politics.
Just in these last few years, there have been ministers, members of parliament, even a deputy prime minister that have actually been arrested, that are being indicted, where there is ongoing court cases.
Our two deputy prime ministers, one is in the run in Switzerland, one is indicted, and the government is protecting through official immunity. The Minister of Environment is in prison. The mayor of the capital is in prison. Dozens of mayors have been indicted for abuse of office and corruption. The current leader of the opposition was the former prime minister. He's also indicted for corruption and is facing charges. This is the kind of environment and state capture that people are rising up against.
But this is where SPOC comes in, the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office that was created at the EU's request specifically to be independent from the government so they can go after that entrenched corruption and state capture. So in a sense, it's kind of a good sign that we're seeing so many investigations, indictments, and arrests in recent years.
That's the first thing that happens when you start cleaning up a corrupt system is you're going to see a lot more cases. You're going to see a lot more court rulings and people going to jail. This is not going to happen overnight, and this is far from being finished, but it's a positive development that we see.
Look, it's a mixed story because Albania has all been struggling against all these demons. Society is very pro-European in a sense, from the bottom up. It's not that everything is dark in here, and there are people rising in the street. That's an expression of, democracy. That's what people in Europe do in a sense.
On June 21st, protests against luxury resort developments escalated. Demonstrators attacked equipment at the site of a former resort project in the south of the country. Developers at the Kushner Resort responded to the nationwide backlash by removing all construction equipment from the area of their project. Not because the project is cancelled, they're just waiting for the temperature to go down so they can continue. But at that point, the situation had the attention of members of the European Parliament.
But Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner have exposed the Albanian government to some weak spots in their system.
The Greens IFA parliamentary group put together a fact-finding mission, so I hitched a ride with them to Vjosa-Narta.
This is where the man, the local citizen, was dragged just in this part of the lagoon.
The delegation came to Albania to look into the situation in the context of the country's status as a potential EU member state, and, let's be honest, to shoot some social media content.
This is Vjosa Island. This is the island that Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner want.
Hands off Vjosa-Narta!
I mean, who am I to judge? By the way, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more journalism like this, and support us on Patreon if you can afford to. We really need your help to keep the lights on. There's also YouTube memberships, Ko-fi, super thanks on YouTube if you can't afford a subscription, all of those links down below.
Okay, so that over there is Sazan Island.
Yes, that's Sazan Island.
So we started.
Yes, so here. We started just here, on those hills. 2 hills there, went through this beach, which is called Dalyan Beach. And then we reached, these are nature monuments. They are called the Molasik Hills.
The gravel road that I'm standing on was made for the bulldozers that are flattening the land for the Kushner resorts. This used to be completely uninterrupted terrain, and these dunes take hundreds of years to form, and they were destroyed in 24 hours.
The government also claims not a single tree was cut down in order for the road to pass through this forest.
And this is the Limpuo Lagoon, which is also a nature monument.
So this is where they want to build a lagoon for the ships.
So they want to have it open for the boats to enter. So if this is open, the vegetation is removed, the water level is increased, and the channel is connected with the sea.
Can you point to the end of the construction?
So the end of the construction should be somewhere here.
How many kilometers of beach does this construction take?
Almost 6 kilometers of beach.
I came here thinking this was mostly a corruption story, but seeing Svrnets with my own eyes has given me a new understanding of the scale of this project. I've been describing it as a luxury resort for lack of a better term, but this is a private billionaire city, with plans for up to 10,000 rooms and private villas, and lakes being artificially connected to the sea to turn them into harbors for the billionaires' yachts. There are thousands of billionaire playgrounds to choose from in the world, but wild ecosystems like these are increasingly threatened and precious.
What is Vjosa-Narta? For Albanians, it's a place where their grandparents fished. It's a place where they first saw flamingos, or where they dream of taking their children one day. For Edi Rama, it's a piggy bank being smashed open to be enjoyed by him and his friends.
The planned construction of large-scale real estate in such a fragile area is an immense threat. And so it was sad to see how much damage already has been done.
Stan Aron, independent journalist, you met with the Minister of Environment this morning. Can you tell us how that meeting went, please?
Yeah. We met with the minister and we tried to understand what happened in the process of permit issues, etc. And in the end, we agreed to disagree, I think. He kept on insisting that they would make sure they would align with EU standards end of 27.
The idea that the Albanian government can claim, in good faith, to have plans to align itself with EU environmental norms by 2027, all the while doing everything it can to ram projects like these through without waiting for building permits or impact studies, is insane.
And I said, but it's not loyal if you first deteriorate the situation and then say, but in 1.5 years' time, we will make sure we align, because the damage has then already been done.
And I wonder if they would be able to get away with it. Would EU authorities care in the context of Albania's member state application?
This is something I'm a bit scared of, that this is going to happen, that they will now push through, that some economic development will happen, and afterwards they say, okay, now we comply with the European law. Because if I look at the reaction of the European Commission and of member states, I don't see a big push for them to push Albania to adhere to change the climate law back to the way it was.
Vice President of the European Parliament, but deep inside, I am the son of a shepherd who raised sheep in Romania. So I feel here at home. Albania is our sister nation.
But there's something more happening here. Because Albania applied for EU membership in 2009, and the world has changed in significant ways since then.
I was only 9 years old when I saw Ceausescu fall down. And you had to wait another 3 years until Enver Hoxha was down. But now, you don't have to take dictatorship anymore. It's been long enough. Enough with the corruption, enough with the transition, enough with the dictatorships.
In the 2000s, we still operated under the illusion that liberal democracy was inevitable. It was the way of the future. Now, 17 years later, the global trend of democratic backsliding is clear, and leaders like Edi Rama might not have closed the door on the idea of joining the EU, but post-Brexit, post-Trump, post everything we've seen in the last couple of decades, for many leaders, it doesn't seem as attractive or as inevitable as it used to be.
So my question is, why are Europeans here and why is Edi Rama not here? Why is Edi Rama not talking to you?
People are struggling against their demons, and that's why they need Europe's help. That's the EU should be here supporting them. And it was really heartwarming that you have these MEPs coming and standing up with protesters, asking for the transparency, asking for the rule of law to be upheld, asking for the environment to be protected. That's what the European values are, and that's what they are supporting here.
It makes sense in this period when the future of democracy and the European project is uncertain, to say the least, for leaders like Edi Rama to hedge their bets by also fostering closer relations with authoritarians, despots, and autocrats like the Trumps, like the Erdogans, like the Xis, like the Putins, and so on, whose model of governance seems to be on the rise, while the democratic model is on the back foot.
When they say to you, your energy will run out, people will not come anymore. Don't believe them, because the real power is with you.
And while an increasing number of governments seem to be ready to embrace that reality, democracy isn't over as long as movements like these persist.
I mean, it's very uncommon for people to rise up and asking for the opposition leader and the head of government to be sent to prison. Albania is not poor. Albania gets stolen over and over and over. Most of the time what you hear in the protests is that we can stand on our own 2 feet. As long as this corrupt criminal elite, which has been on the country's back, siphoning up all his energy for the last 3 decades, gets pulled off.
Remember, the road might be long, but you are on the right side of history. And if you're on the right side of history, God in heaven is with you.
I'm gonna leave this video of a kitten I met in Albania over the credits as a thank you for watching until the end. Special thanks for this video go to Alice Capel for hooking me up on this project, as well as Vengeful God and Solo Q for big donations that genuinely helped me out of a tight spot, and everyone who contributed to getting my laptop fixed. And thanks as always to Patreon and YouTube members and all of you who support the channel despite the long gaps in between videos. There are some really cool projects coming soon, so we'll see you next time.